Okay, so planning for the future and predicting the future are two different things. The AOC likes to predict metals, and they're notorious for that sort of stuff. They're not very good at planning for metals and planning for the future. There's a big, big difference between those two things. And oftentimes, if you do everything right, all it can do is improve your chance of success in many, many things. You can do financial planning, you can do all sorts of different things in life, but all you do is improve your chances of success. Phil Winton predicts, he's a guy that's been producing times for many, many years and predicting times in the future. And I can remember looking at times that he had predicted years ago going, oh God, nobody's ever going to get to those times. But I look at these times here that he's predicted just this year, a couple of months ago, and not one of them stand out at me and say, God, that's too tough for our guys or our girls. You know, that they're really within striking range of those times and very, very capable of making those sort of times. So predicting those results and those times are things. 4 things that I'd like to talk to you about: rule changes, training in health and immunology, how these things are going to go forward into the future, swimmer morphology, how swimmers are developing, and then competition changes in competition. FINA traditionally is bagged by everybody. Even George Block here, who's sort of half giving them a compliment, is criticizing them on the other side. But FINA is actually one of the better world sporting federations at making rule changes compared to, I think, sports like Eddie the Eagle, ski jumping, where it took them 6 years to modify the ski jump suits and take the wings off them so that the guys weren't sailing right off the end of the ski hills. Or things like FIFA with the video goal line scoring. It's been on their discussion papers for over 25 years, and they still haven't incorporated it. So FINA actually is quite good at adopting rule changes for swimming. And this is sort of a list of some of the things that they've done. And the researchers have come through and they've noted that FINA rule changes have made a 2 to 3% change in performances, have helped swimmers 2 to 3% in the future. So where does that take us into the future? I'm just getting caught up here. A lot of the rule changes will come from innovators, from sponsors, people, especially Omega and Speedo, who will make suit changes, who will make equipment manufacture changes, backstroke ledges, all those sort of things. I don't remember people asking for them. I don't remember people actually saying, you know what, we really need a backstroke ledge for starts. But somebody realized that there's a market out there, brought out the innovation. It's important to know how close to get to these sponsors so you have access to them, but you don't get bound by them. In 2009, New South Wales and Swiss, we lost probably 4 gold medals at the World Championships, I estimate, because our swimmers were forced to swim with Speedo suits. Not forced, coerced into swimming with Speedo suits and not having the best equipment available to them. Water manipulation, if you look back at the old history books, 1920s up to the 50s, the first chapter of swimming technique books were always about water. Temperature, density, how salty they were, that sort of stuff. And I think that that's one of the things that might be looked at in the future. One of the competitions, 2007 World Championships, they actually swam at Rod Laver Arena, and they had the filters there and everything. They never used any sand in the filters. They went through the whole competition with unfiltered water. The water got softer and softer and softer as it went through. And there's a lot of, the other thing that I talked to Stephan about today was trying to sell him the N-Swiss inflatable lane that we have for altitude training that's just been sitting in SOPAC for the past 4 years. But this is a simple thing that you can build, like you have your inflatable slides at the pools, you know, on holidays and stuff like this. You can now build a 1-lane altitude tent for your swimming pool. And pools that are close to publics and have the arrangements that you can set them up, take them down. The very, very cost-efficient way to do it. Flip turns in medley and on the form strokes. This is something that's been around for a long time, and now being able to touch the wall at an angle allows people to do the turns a lot quicker. It's been in the rules now for over a year and a half, 2 years, and nobody's done anything with it. However, let me tell you that in 1987 we had a swimmer, Marcel Geary, a Canadian boy that broke the world record swimming 100 flies short course with flip turns. In 1995, Scott Goodman used flip turns on the last 3 turns of the 200 fly in Gothenburg to win the World Championships. So it's not a new thing, but it's something that's fallen out of our program. Training changes in performances. Australia has been a great innovator of training changes. Speed through endurance with Forbes Carlisle, and the great one with Gennady Turetsky coming to the country, introducing reverse periodization, which is a great story in itself. But then the way the coaches adopted this, people like Shannon Rollison, that took the concept of reverse periodization and enhanced it and made it better and produced fantastic, fantastic athletes right across the board. Health status for athletes is an important one that has improved tremendously. When I first moved to this country, swimmers would train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and be sick Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They'd be injured. They'd be in getting shoulders done, backs, everything wrecked. Now I look at the swimmers, and they're healthy. They're healthy for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And the planning and the ability that the coaches have and the understanding that you have in looking after your athletes is quite remarkable. So where does that take us into the future with these particular things, with health and training? Improved delivery methods of apps, okay, and to IT programs. There's some stuff out there that's absolutely fantastic, but if you try to learn it all, you're going to spend your whole day, you're going to be an IT expert by the end of it. And as we develop, and we become more IT savvy, and the apps get more friendly to use, things like Coach's Eye, fantastic tool. Absolutely obliterated dartfish, all in one swipe. And it's a free thing, or it costs you $6 for the product, and it's really good. Whereas products like AMS, Athlete Management System through the Sports Commission, is still bulky and awkward to use on a daily basis for a coach. The 24-hour athlete well-being thing, take a pill, get your core body temperature now for the next 3 days, but they'll be able to also monitor your heart rate, your blood pressure, your endocrine system, your immunology through that whole period. So twice a week you take a pill and you get your whole health check done up through that whole time for athletes, and that'll be quite good. Another one is the linking of homeopathic medicine and traditional Western medicine. Because Western medicine is getting better at monitoring slight variations in physiology and physical changes in patients, they can now determine that, they show that things like rosemary improve your memory. Things like lavender help you sleep. And so homeopathic medicines can really be a benefit when mixed with Western medicines. And also understanding better contributing factors, which instead of looking for the big cause and effect, but looking at small contributing factors in health and in training make a big, big difference. Are swimmers getting bigger? The traditional belief is yes, they are. Ron, is David taller than you? No. Okay, and that's pretty much across the board. The research going back to the 1991 World Championships shows that our swimmers are actually the same size. We had optimal morphology in 1991 with our athletes, and they haven't changed much in the past 25 years, if at all. No significant physical changes. This is the slide of the 100 freestyle world record holders over 100 years, from the Duke up to Eamon Sullivan in 2008. And it looks like they're going up and up and up, and they're getting taller and bigger guys all the way through. But if we look at it from Matt Biondi in 1988, this is the way it looks here. They're getting smaller. The sprinters are smaller. The best sprinters are smaller, from 2 meters to 190. 10 centimeters shorter, but 24 kilos lighter. That's a sack of potatoes. That's as big as my gut. You know, it's huge. You know, it's a lot of weight. So it's really important that we look at that. And what we can expect into the future there, maybe shorter male swimmers, taller female swimmers. The difference between male and female swimmers may only be a little bit. The men will always be stronger because of their endocrine system and testosterone and the ability to produce power and this sort of stuff. But the size may not differ. And when you look at fluid dynamics, anybody that's a real math whiz, look up Reynolds number, and it has really good explanations for it in that area. Okay, of how water flows through tubes, how fast it can flow through the tube, and how big the tube has to be. The other thing that Talent ID is coming to you with is DEXA scanning, 3D scanning, flexibility, all the testing that Swimming Australia is going to be doing is going to be a big factor in identifying what athletes can do what things when. My last topic that I wanted to mention to you in my 15 minutes of fame was competition. Okay? Racing, financial incentives. There's a big variation out there in the world of what you can get from different countries if you win gold medals. Competition series. The Mare Nostrum Tour has been going on since 1986, maybe 85, but 1986, and it regularly has over $200,000 in prize money. U.S. invitationals and Australian meets don't have prize money. Different philosophies, different things. What that means in the future, I love the Britain one, that's a good one. That's about where they're at too. Swimming for the glory. What we can plan for in the future of competitions, we've already got mixed relays. We can look at more shorter sprints. We're going to see 25-meter racing. Why? Because it's not predictable. There's more variation. There's more chance of other people winning, of not having the same result. Swimming is a very one-dimensional, predictable sport so that the public or whoever's watching it knows what it is. It's only interesting for mom and me and the swimmer what they're doing, if they do a best time. It's not interesting to too many other people unless it's something like a world record. And then it's a huge gap between those two things. So having these sort of things. Handicapped swimming by time delay. So lane 0, slowest swimmer, lane 8, fastest swimmer, and delay it based on their best times. And they all get their own beep and their own go. Those sort of things can make swimming quite interesting and allows for more variables and in the results. The one I love is swimming. The event I think that would be great is a 4x100 free relay for women versus a 2x200 free for men. I think that could be really good. Or a 300 plus 100. Any sort of those sort of combinations could be really quite interesting. One of the most exciting races ever was Libby racing against Michael Phelps. And he had no chance against her. She swam him down, and she was pumped for that. That was her favorite race, I think. And the final point is Asian. With Tokyo being the host of the next Olympics, a lot of changes could happen. They could have their own Asian swimming circuit. And if it goes to Asia, you're pretty much guaranteed that there will be gambling involved. Okay? And if you want to look it up, look up Keirin Cycling in Japan, where they have the racers on the old standard steel bikes. They lock them up, and then they ride around, and they train them all together, and they're not allowed to be on an email or phones or anything while they're in this training phase, and that they compete head-to-head like that, and that's how they gamble. The last one is values, that the Swimming Australia is really big on promoting its values. And values, people get mixed up on what they are and all that sort of stuff and don't really quite understand them as philosophies. But very much, they are simply expected behaviors. What we expect of each other in our behaviors and what we expect of our athletes in our behaviors. And that's what values are, and that is filtering down from Swimming Australia to the States, into the clubs, and across all of swimming. And I think the values of swimming in this country are fantastic, and I think they'll continue to grow definitely into the future. So that's my little 2 cents, and Stephan's up now.
Unfortunately, I never met Joe King. I literally just arrived at the in Australia when Joe King passed away. Heard all the great things and great stories about him, and again, a privilege to be able to speak in this lecture. Not sure whether this works. Okay, who thinks in this room they have something to do with these athletes winning medals? Please put your hands up if you think you have something to do with these athletes winning medals. Okay, well, I probably look differently at it. I think every one of you has something to do with this, because what, hang on, something doesn't. Whatever we do here, I think it's all interlinked. And to me, this is one of the circles that we have to be able to look very carefully at for future developments. Whether it's Learn to Swim, the Junior Dolphins, a great new initiative, whether it's regional state level swimming, youth teams or Australian national teams, I do believe strongly, more so nowadays than maybe a while ago, that they're all very strongly interlinked. And here is why. This is one of our problems. So around 2010 and in the years before, we probably had around 70,000 members across Australia. If you think of these medal winners, 3 swimmers winning 6 gold medals, that's pretty much, if you go down to 50,000, like the 70,000 members from the past have to do with the medal list nowadays, if that makes sense. The membership, a big pool, a big pot, and talent comes through. Now today we have around 50,000 members in Australia. So to me that means somewhat, probably one of these medalists, 1/3 less members, how can we expect the same outcome as a nation? Suddenly we got 20,000 swimmers less in this nation. Unless we coaches do an incredible much better job, it won't happen. It's a numbers game. Sport is a numbers game. So tomorrow's sporting results will be a reflection of what happens today, of the numbers we have today, what we coaches do today, how we prepare these younger athletes for the future. So, long-term planning in our sport. So one side I feel the existence of our future is at risk because of this membership development in a negative way. If that's true, then we are professionally in trouble as well. Because the less swimmers out there, the less coaching positions will be out there. And that will have a massive impact on our employment as well. So I feel very strong about this. Grassroots is an essential part. Membership is an essential part of our sport. So from the bottom up, we want to be very healthy as a sport and for us as a state and then as a nation, and that can potentially make the difference. So how to make the difference? And this is where we're all part of it. Long-term development to me is one of the key things, professional development. This is an active participation exercise. This is not someone, you're waiting at home for someone knocking on your door, open the door, hey, guess what, I have something for you. This is your job, this is my job, to keep on pushing, to keep on finding new ways. How you do this? Formal education, make sure you keep on attending conferences or workshops. You create mentor programs. If there's no one around, you go and seek them yourself. informal, to me that's a big one. We're talking about tacit knowledge versus explicit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is coaching, happens much more in casual meetings, in a small talk, with peers, with a few coaches together, on training on pool deck. That's where we can learn a lot about our sport. So how could this unfold in a long-term planning? So we have to become better at creating a better, optimizing the club experience. This will have an impact then again on our memberships. Then through that we can have more money, can do more things again, but we have to be able to become better as well at the whole athletic development of our swimmers, and we have to learn more about it, what it is specifically for particular groups. So if I only look at this slide and talk about memberships, so we have to become specialists and experts, no matter in what group you are. If you work and learn to swim, or more so junior dolphins, or JX, or regional levels, you have to learn about it. What is it what these members need? What is specific about that kind of swimming? So your club environment, whether you work in a high performance area, your club has to look very differently than the one who works mainly in maybe junior dolphins and JX development. You have to be able to provide that. So we have to be more specific in the future with what we do with our members than where we are today. Other aspects, sensitive training phases. If I do the same training with regional swimmers as I do with high-performance swimmers, then there's something wrong. If I do the same similar weekly structure with the 10-year-olds as I do with a high-performance program, there is something wrong. I do believe as a nation we're quite good at high performance and knowing how to push the envelope in that area, what it is to provide world class. But what's world class coaching junior dolphins level? How does that look like? That has to look very differently, but how does it look like? And I encourage you to find out, to challenge you to go out there and find new ways how that could look like. Same way, communication. I talk very differently to a high-performance athlete than to a 7 or 8-year-old. Use the 7 or 8-year-old imagination, have fun, provide different stimulus than what things I have to do with the high-performance athlete. Competition structure. I know Jim talked about parts of it. It's always nice when maybe the state bodies and the national bodies provide all these opportunities. But there's no issue for you to come together with the club from next door and create a dual meet where you just swim at a particular program, whether it's a fun program for the little ones, whether it's this week we just work middle distance freestyle and have a racing event on. Most of the competitions are pretty much set in stone, but I know Swimming Australia looks at it as well. How does the future age national championships look like? Should it look like the same way? Should the 12-year-old swim there? Maybe yes, maybe no. These are constant discussions we have to have as a group, as peers. Another aspect in the long-term athletes development. My kids go to school now, they're 6 and 8 years of age, and I'm amazed how often I'm pulled in as a parent in a positive way of contributing to my kids' learning. And I think if we look at this, with the athlete obviously has a massive impact on a successful future. The parents have a massive impact. I think as a group, we can't be afraid of the parents anymore. I know it's a big talk all the time with coaches, but in the future, again, we have to be better at communicating to parents, with parents, and getting them on board in a healthy way that they assist in us together developing the future of athletes. And very obviously the coach within this triangle. And then you will have support staff and other people involved as well. But these three groups, the better we come together, the more we communicate in a positive way, the better it is for the swimmers. And we're definitely in Queensland, we start to roll out a lot of parent talks and educations for coaches, but as well presentations for the parents only to try to make a difference in that specific area. So again, I talked about this coaching methods versus development stages. So what is world-class coaching at each level? Should it look different? I believe it has to look different. It has to look very different. How should coaching change in regards to the athlete's development stages? So the beginner level, we probably all agree it should be fun, but what does that really mean? How should that look like? How do we communicate? Is learn to swim and then these first levels, I still believe we teach quite often strokes. Let's say we teach freestyle. Is that essential at that age? Or is it essential to teach movement, literacy and physical literacy to the athletes? Meaning, for example, abilities of balancing in the water, abilities of floating, being long in the water, straight arm out of the water, bend arm out of the water, straight arm underwater, bend arm underwater. Give them varieties of exposure that their little bodies learn more to deal with this environment, water. The modern athlete is way more athletic. Does that mean that we still spend the same amount of time in the water? Right now, we're very good at providing stimulus and education and training in water. The future athlete is more athletic. That can happen in dry land as well in a very positive way, that it is part of it. Intermediate level, potential looks different again, and then high performance level. Just keep an eye on the time here. So, if we, this is now more development level. I focus a little bit more on the development level, and I know Glenn will later on focus more on the top end as well. So these are just a few thoughts from my side. So if we decide, so how many sessions should a kid train at a particular age? And maybe it's something like 1 week per age. Yeah, a 6-year-old, maybe 6 hours of training. I'm not saying that 6 hours of swimming. There can be 6 hours of different training that helps the future swimmer. Is that something? I'm not saying that's the solution, but you come up with a guideline that it's continuously improving, increasing in numbers. I do believe if younger ones, again I'm talking probably 12 and under, sport-free days are essential, so that they can catch up with being a child, that they can catch up with maybe school. But again, I don't want that to get in the way of being a child. What are other sports that potentially help our swimmers? We all probably agree gymnastics could be a great sport. So are we scared as coaches to send our swimmers across to another coach from another sport? We shouldn't be scared, because if we do a great job, we won't lose them. But we provide them with extra stimulus, with an extra opportunity to learn more about their little bodies, about movement patterns, and therefore they will be better athletes in the future. How should that look like? So if we look at time in the water versus athletic development, we talk more about athletic development. I know Scott Munro from Swimming Queensland will talk later on about it as well. So how could that look like in the future? Do we just train athletes in the water? Regional pools closing down in the winter. I think this is actually exciting, because it gives you for several months, without the distraction of a pool, the opportunity to create better athletes. And then when they start the season swimming again, they hopefully rock up in a better condition and a better future athlete. So it always depends how we look at the same thing. Estimated time for free play. Free play, again, I'm talking about young kids. The society structures nowadays everything, from the morning almost when these little buggers get up, to doing some work, some piano lessons, and then to school, and then back to swimming and whatever. And I'm halfway guilty of that. What I try to do really hard with my kids is the free play. That is good for them. Playing is not a waste of time. Playing is learning, interaction, them having fun, being engaged. Whether free playing happens with siblings or on a cricket field or down on the beach, whatever that is. But that it is still planned and allowed for them to do. That we don't get in the way of the kids to grow up we will be old enough and adults for long enough in our lives. So come up with a different concept. Give it a few weeks, see what that can look like, and move forward and adapt a few things if necessary. And then there's one of the other big ones to me. So who do you surround yourself with? Are there people who have a big ego and it's all about them? Or are there really people who just want the best for the little swimmers? And I had just a very quick chat to Glenn before about something. So my question nowadays is, should actually state bodies, national bodies get involved in younger athletes' development? Thinking that it's about outcome, about times, about all these things, and potentially if our structures and the way we think, we get in the way of other developments. So I'm not sure about that, but we certainly would like to be able to guide this process a little bit more as a state body, and we try to influence as many people as we can. I just flick very quickly through. This is one thing that will be soon handed out from our end. Integration into a long-term athlete development, how this could look like. You guys will get the notes. It's not necessarily that we read this. I think it's time. Pretty much spot on. So that was it from my side. I hope I gave you something to think about, and don't keep on doing what you've done. Keep on adapting, changing, learning, moving forward. Be brave. Be brave out there in your coaching, and so that we have a brighter future. The memberships grow again, and the medals all the way through will reflect that as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephan. That was an excellent lead into what I'm going to talk about today. So my job is actually to talk about how this all ties together from a national perspective. And we actually work with guys like Stephan and Jim, Lee Nugent through Victoria as well, as part of this process to look at how we can develop this long-term athlete development plan. So we rely on some of the technical expertise that we get from these guys, and also some other bits and pieces which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. For me too, it is an absolute privilege to be able to talk today. I actually did know Joe King very well, and he was actually my group coach at the LA Olympics in 1984 when I won a silver medal. So to have the opportunity to speak today is really important to me, so I'm very appreciative. So clearly I'm going to speak today from a little bit of a global perspective because I represent Swimming Australia, and there, a very pretty picture of a globe. So first and foremost, I think when we're looking at what we're looking for at the beginning part of the picture, we have to look also at what is required at the end of the picture. So the average age of finalists last year at the 2012 Olympics for men was 24 and for women was 22. So my question to you today, what does that mean? From all the things that Stephan has just told you. We do? And what else? We do? That's true. And most importantly, they're already in the water now. So those athletes that are going to be here for the next Olympics in 2020 are already in the water. If you look at averages, and I know we're going to have some that are going to be younger and some that are going to be older that represent at that level. And if you go down the train and you have a little bit of a look, on average there'll be 18-year-old females and 20-year-old males in Tokyo currently that's what they are now if they're in the system. If we look ahead at 2024, you can look back, and also 2032. So if you have a look at those age ranges and you just have a look at what Stephan presented, what does that tell you? So many questions straight after lunch. Okay, it probably pretty much represents athletes at various levels of the development pathway. If you look at the 6 to 8-year-olds, where would they currently be? Probably in the learn to swim system already. Okay, if they're 10 to 12, where might they be? Junior squads, 14 to 16. Yeah, age group swimming is maybe in your talent program, potentially at the bottom end of your youth program, 18 to 20. Yeah, hopefully senior age group, and hopefully on the verge of progressing between junior swimming and senior swimming. So long-term planning. hopefully. At the moment, who currently has an 8 to 12 year plan for the athletes that they're working with? I don't see too many hands at this particular point. Okay, well that's what we're looking at, and that's what Stephan was talking about, appropriate types of activities at various levels of the development chain. So the other question, which I think is really important, and I think probably Stephan touched on this as well, is what role do you play in the development pathway? And my personal feeling is not everybody has to play the same role in that development pathway. For example, we will have high performance coaches, very important part of the system. We'll have learn to swim teachers, who are a very important part of the system. But a learn to swim teacher doesn't have to be a high performance coach, and vice versa. They've just got to be good at what they do to make sure that the pathway progresses in the manner that we would like. So where do you start? That's a very good question. Does anyone want to offer a solution? No? That's good. I'll have something to talk about then. I think what I'm about to talk to you about is one of the most important resources that is going to come in for swimming in terms of long-term athlete development. It's on the drawing boards now, and it's been done in conjunction with the AIS, the resource of the AIS and technical leads in our sport right around the country. And this is what's called the National Athlete Pathway Framework. Okay, it's a lot of words, and one is being developed specifically for swimming. They're actually being developed for all sports currently around the country. And what it is based on research. Okay, research at looking what's appropriate in terms of training prescriptions, strength and conditioning, nutrition, right along the development pathway from learn to swim right through to elite and mastery in our sport. We've had input from technical leads, so we meet quite consistently with guys like Stephan, as I said, and Lee Nugent. And what we want to do is form an aligned pathway that can be instituted right throughout the country, which provides guidelines and information for swim coaches, for parents and for athletes about what's appropriate at every level on the development pathway. So it's not going to be prescriptive, it's going to be guidelines. In other words, if you're at this particular stage of development or physical maturity, these are the types of things that would be appropriate at each of these different levels as part of the athlete framework. Why is that important? I think it gives us a consistent guideline that's based on science and fact for people to follow. As I said, it doesn't have to mean that everybody's got to do exactly the same, because that would take away from the art of coaching. But what it does give is a roadmap, a long-term athlete development roadmap based on science, based on fact, which people can follow. So if we look at this, and this is just an example of how it would apply to swimming, and this is not a multi-level at this particular point, this is just an overview. So if you have a look, and this model is called the FTEM model, it was developed through the AIS, where it looks from foundation movement, which is some of the things that Stephan was talking about, right through the development pathway until we get through to success. Some of those athletes that we were looking at the picture, one who had a cross through, I'm not sure why Mitch got the cross, but anyway, they would be considered mastery athletes. They've produced consistently over multiple international performances over a number of years. So let's have a little bit of a look at what that represents. So in that foundation area, the basic foundation movements and an extension of that, what would you think that would represent on the development pathway? Learn to swim, exactly right. Good answers here. We're doing very, very well. Okay. At the top end of the foundation, where would we transition from learn to swim? Yeah, probably junior swim or club swimming, if we have something on there. We do, club swimming. The next level of the development pathway, where we look at, we've got demonstrated potential. You might be picked up in a talent ID program, something like that. What do you think that would represent? Very good question. It would? But a talent program. So we run a national talent program where people are identified through the national championships, not necessarily purely on performance, but on a whole range of parameters, of which, once again, our mentor coaches are involved. And also the states do that within their state programs as well. The top end of the talent, what would you think that would represent on the development pathway? Very good. I think you should be up here. You're doing a great job. Okay, that'll be part of the youth program. All right, so we've moved from the area where talent has been identified. We're developing talent through the youth program, and our job specifically in the youth area is to prepare people for the senior national team and performances accordingly. And so the top end of the development pathway clearly would be the senior team. All right, so in a snapshot, that's what our development pathway looks. And what we're doing in terms of developing this National Athlete Pathway Framework is putting information to go with that at every given level. So as I said, Stephan gave us some examples of things that he's looking at, particularly in that developmental area, and that would be matched to the framework right across the pathway, right through to the elite and mastery. Okay, so just a little bit of information. That swimming sport specific guidelines will be presented at each level. So what I was talking about is making sure that we have appropriate guidelines for strength and conditioning, and that would be more or less appropriate, obviously, in the development areas. It might be nutrition, it might be training prescription, it could be sports psychology and how that's delivered across the framework as well. So just for me to finish today, that's a very small snapshot of what's coming, and just to give you a bit of an indication, this is being, as I said, developed in conjunction with the resources of the AIS, with a view to launching this athlete pathway framework probably post the Olympics. So the delivery model is yet to be devised, because what we want to do, obviously under each one of those headings, as Stephan's shown you already, you could have a multitude of activities or guidelines of bits and pieces that you could look at each of those levels. So we want to build in links about where you can find that information, what's appropriate, and the types of things that would be appropriate at each level. So just for food for thought, we've looked at an overall long-term athlete development plan. Let's have a look at something in a bit more of a 4-year cycle, which is, I think, appropriate as well. If we were looking at those three areas, ideas in innovation, testing and strategy formation, program reinforcement, let's look at the top one first. Over any 4-year cycle or Olympic cycle, how would you see the ideas and innovation going? Where would that fit in that 4-year cycle model? No? Okay. Ideally, and probably most likely, the innovation part would become in the first part of the cycle. Okay? That's where you would be trying new things, testing new things. You wouldn't necessarily be doing it at the back end of the 4-year Olympic cycle, would you? No? Okay, good. Testing those ideas and the strategy around them, obviously that would start fairly low, would probably peak in the middle 2 years of that Olympic cycle, but as you come through the last year of that Olympic cycle, you're not going to be doing that. You would be consolidating things. All good? And finally, program reinforcement probably starts at a smaller level at the beginning of the 4-year cycle, but peaks out. So to give you a snapshot or an example of how that sits, we have a number of coaches in the room, and we've obviously just gone through our Olympic selection trials. I would think most of the coaches and athletes that are involved in the Olympic Games this year will be largely looking at program reinforcement in this next cycle as they prepare for the Olympic Games. They're not going to be looking at trialling new ideas and innovation. Their strategy should be pretty well set, and they're going to be reinforcing what they do in this period between the Olympic trials and the Olympic Games. All make sense? Excellent. Thank you very much for listening. And now we'll open it up to questions. Yes.
Talent ID program.
Yeah.
Will you be selecting a certain amount from each state? Or
Yes. Well, from a national perspective, how that's done is we have the coach mentors from each of the states. At the National Age Group Championships, they talent ID kids across a wide range of parameters, not necessarily based on results. It may be body type, it might be how they structure races, the type of training program they come from, how they pace their races. It could be a combination of types of things. And then we do that as a blind ID process. And what I mean by that is Stephan will who he thinks, And we have 3 or 4 others that do the same. We collate those results, and then each of the states puts forward their athletes, and we bring them into a national camp from that point of view.
And with the development of the youth swimmers, obviously if we send swimmers over to do the camps and the talent ID camp and all that, will the people running that also pass the information back to the coaches so that the coach can get better as well as the swimmer?
Yeah, we normally take that responsibility on ourselves. So anything that's presented at a camp, and whether it's programs, testing, education components, they'll be pushed back to the home coaches always. But what we are looking at this year particularly is we need to track athletes as we go through. So this year in the youth area, for the first time, we're benchmarking athletes. So we looked at body comp at the selection trials of anyone that had qualified for the junior teams. We'll follow those through, and we do understand that we've got developing bodies in the age group area specifically. We also are running a sports psych skills inventory with our junior team athletes, and we want to take that down probably to the talent ID athletes as well, to find out what they actually know in that sports psych area, so that we can target our camps specifically around the educational needs of those athletes. So what we're trying to do as much as possible is promote alignment with what we're doing right across the country. So, for example, we don't want to present something in a national camp that's already been presented to an athlete at a state-based camp. And similarly, we can work back the other way. We can have through our athlete management system, we can basically check off what people have done and then make sure that the next level is presented either at a state or a national level for that athlete's individual development.
Could you give us an example of an innovation that you would use early on in the cycle?
Me specifically, for me, it'd probably be that'd be the time where I'd try different, maybe slightly different training methods or sets or structures. It could be a different approach to strength and conditioning. It may be introducing something that we haven't done in the dryland area before. But they would be, I can't really probably look at anything specific, but what I would look at, anything which you probably would think is more risky, trying later on in the preparation cycle, but you think might be of a benefit, that would be the time to trial it. If I could give you an example in a smaller scale, I know of one of the athletes that's currently preparing for the Olympics that's trying a slight modification in terms of underwater kicking. But it's only going to be trialled very briefly at the beginning of this preparation cycle. If they don't think it's sustainable, it's not going on. Now, that's a smaller example, but you'd probably look at something more considerable in the lead up or the beginning of an Olympic cycle.
Can you identify exactly what's the reason to lose 20,000 members? It's pretty strong number. And USA Swimming increase their numbers every year. I don't see much difference in the program. It cannot be just one thing. It should be.
I think it's a combination of things. I don't know whether we want to get onto this topic, but I actually think in a lot of respects for age group swimming, it's unattractive. It's unattractive in Australia, our competition structure. You know, if you look at a lot of the sports, a lot of the professional sports have got modified sports or competitions that last a couple of hours. You know, and they train a couple of times a week. Now, we come from a background where we had kids in early, and we lose a lot of kids because of that. I think we have to look at our training structures and specifically our competition structures to make it more attractive to bring people into the sport younger and then have a development pathway which encourages them to be there in the longer. So for me, I feel the same. I don't give a stuff whether there's a 12-year-old national champion, because I'd say chances are they're not going to be there by the time they're 22 or 24 when we want them to perform at their best. So something's wrong as far as that's concerned, and the way I see it, particularly with competition structure, we're still doing the same thing that we've been doing the last 30 years. Nothing's changed. So, you know, is it attractive for athletes and families to get involved in a sport where they can be at the pool 8 or 10 hours a day on a weekend for a competition to swim 2 races? I would think not. So Stephan's right. Yes, we are looking at that. We're looking at competition structures, and that's an integral piece of the puzzle. But also what we deliver to athletes at every level of the development pathway. Sorry, you want to say something, Stephan?
I think also probably Sydney has helped us. Even 15 years ago, we had much healthier numbers. We had an Ian Thorpe. You guys have now Michael Phelps, I think. They're essential things. In 2009, we lost our long-term TV sponsor, and suddenly we're not on commercial air anymore. I think we lost a bit the mojo in that regard as well. But these are probably things we can't control that much. Swimming Australia, we now start to look at membership data more in detail. So what is it that we can be stronger with the 7 to 8-year-olds or 12-year-olds or whatever? So we have to become, as I said, specialists and experts, but the sport has to do that as well, but then each coach within their own region, within their own clubs. I think certain things were out of our we can control it, but then the aspects a coach can control, I think we have to adapt. The team sports are very attractive in this country. They have a lot of airtime on TV, whether it's AFL, whether it's rugby, and swimming is just not there. So that is advertisement again and again and again, where we don't have that. So,
Jim?
I've got nothing to add to that other than I think that there's some systemic problems with pool operators, local councils, prior to having a priority for competitive swimming. A lot of them just sort of push the swimming off to the side and look at money-making programs and realizing that competitive programs cost them money or at the best are break even for them.
Glenn, talent ID.
Yes.
Table of knowledge for you guys here, the wise ones. For the parameters, have you discovered some parameters that work, or did you start out with some parameters and you thought, oh, well, actually looking at that's not going to help us? What are some of the parameters you're going?
No, I don't think it's a developing process for number one. Okay, we've only really done it for the last 2 or 3 years, and what we're trying to do is get away from just, particularly at talent ID level, just looking at results-based selections for teams. That happens at certain levels. It happens at the youth team. It happens at the senior team. At the talent ID, we want to, if for want of a better term, take people's expertise to look or see things that they think might be valuable in the future. For example, it might be somebody like a Leon, who came in as a younger swimmer and was identified because of his brilliant skill level and technical skill. Not necessarily the biggest swimmer in the pool, not necessarily although he's pretty good at age group level, obviously, but those types of things. But we haven't really ruled anything in or out, but we're trying to refine the process each year and have different sets of eyes looking across all different events. We are toying with maybe giving one coach maybe one discipline to look at, as opposed to trying to cover the whole thing. So we're looking to refine the process as we go on. But it in some respects is a blank canvas, but we do look at specific things in terms of training age, the program they come from, the skill level, how they pace, what sort of body type they are. Are they at the bottom end of the age group or at the top end of the age group? Things like that as a starting point, and then of course maybe feel for the water and how they put things together.
If you just before you learn to swim coordinator, just going down a level from where you guys look at, what would you sort of ask the learn to swim coordinator to look for in that pathway through the coaching side?
Well, a number of the things that Stephan's talking about, but and then I think particularly body position in the water as being the foundation for all the strokes beyond that. But I think I tend to agree. We don't have much play or free play or as part of our programs at this particular point, and I think that needs to come back as well. And it can be a crossover. For swimming particularly, it doesn't necessarily all have to be about the swimming lesson. It might be them doing diving, or it could be doing them gymnastics, or it could be doing water polo, or it could be just playing down the beach. Combinations of things that might involve water activities, but not always specific, particularly in the younger age groups.
I think on Learn to Swim level, we got up to 1 million kids every single year being involved in Learn to Swim, and we got 50,000 members across the age, probably from 7 to 30. That is so poor in my beliefs, and so we have to become better at converting these great numbers. 1 million, that's great, that's awesome. So how can we create healthier relationships? And I know Swimming Australia has now a great relationship with ASCA, and I think Swim Australia, that's something ongoing. But we, as you as a local club, you want to have, if you don't have your own Learn to Swim, you want to create great relationships with the people around you who run these programs. It's not us versus them. It's really us creating a relationship that we benefit from them and from each other for the future. I think there's a massive pool sitting there, and we have to start to tap into that one as well.
I think we do have a perception problem as well. The perception being that Learn to Swim, and then we're training 10 times a week. And the reality, that's not the case. But we probably have to work pretty hard on changing that perspective and also putting appropriate structures in place. Yeah. There's a combination. There's not a really good flow necessarily from Learn to Swim through into introduction of the sport. So that's where that Junior Dolphins program comes in, where the competitive element is far more fun for a start. And then, of course, like most sports, we have a dropout in the upper end of the youth area, particularly where people can't see that necessarily they can make the transition to a senior national team. Yeah.
With the members that you have, there's an 85% dropout rate between high school age kids and university age kids. So between this age of plus or minus a year, 17 and 18 years of age, there's an 85% dropout rate of your best members. So the kids that have been in the sport for 10 years, from 8 years old to 18, that's where they're dropping out. They bet your best swimmers because they don't see a plan and there's not a program for them unless they are on a senior team or they are on the national team. One of the challenges here, I think, is to develop a competition model, be it through university swimming, which would be my priority, but the competition model that retains these athletes and brings them back, keeps them in the sport, even though they're not going to be, they're pretty pragmatic at 18. Parents are pragmatic where they're spending their money, where they're going to go and what they're going to start doing, and developing models along that line that are into catering to those types of athletes. And the other one with the Learn to Swim question, trying to do talent identification with Learn to Swim, I've gone back down in the past couple of years and had a pretty good look at what Learn to Swim teachers are doing and not doing. But the three things that I would look for with kids that come out of Learn to Swim: are they comfortable being underwater? Do they like to swim underwater? They could shoot underwater, or are they constantly like this, Second thing is their kicking. Do they kick? Too many Learn to Swim people just don't kick. It's nothing but bloody-minded determination. It can be fun, but it is bloody-minded determination. And the third thing, the aspect, is balance, buoyance, stability in the water. How do they float? But those three things I'd be looking at coming from the Learn to Swim into the junior squad programs.